Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. So much drama today, we're going to break it all down. Lewis Hamilton saying that he does not believe Sebastian Vettel will be retired for long after his final race here in Abu Dhabi. Maybe going to come back in a year or two just like Fernando Alonso did. But also Carlos Sainz heavily implying he believes Sergio Perez indeed did crash on purpose back in Monaco. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Loads to discuss. This is Alonso's helmet this weekend. Thought it was a rather nice danker Seb here, who's got the German flag as well. Even put this on Instagram, right? So of all the drivers to, do something like this for Seb, I thought it was quite nice and maybe even surprising in a way that it was Fernando Alonso himself. But yeah, I thought it was kind of nice to see. Now, this clip I wanted to share from the press conferences before the race weekends, where Lewis Hamilton says he's seen many drivers over the years that get suckered into Formula 1 more than they expect to. He doesn't think Seb really wants to end his career quite yet. Of course, he's retiring at the end of this season. Maybe a lot of that, and probably is due to the fact that he's been in the Aston Martin, not a very competitive car the last couple of years. Understandable that Vettel's fed up of fighting for the, for points rather than fighting for wins. But Hamilton reckons, look, he's seen many drivers over the years that are just too attached to Formula 1. Yes, they can step away. Doesn't mean they're going to stay away, especially if Audi are coming in a couple of years.
Honestly, and I was just sitting here thinking, most drivers are coming back. Like, he's come back. You're probably going to come back. We're seeing other drivers coming back, so I'm sitting here kind of accepting, yes, it's your last race, but you'll be back. Formula 1 has a way of sucking you back in. We've noticed that from so many other drivers, so... No?
Maybe we can make a deal. We speak outside.
Yeah.
When you want to get away, maybe I want to come back.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
And just swap, alternate,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is potentially one of the key points here, is that in a couple of years' time, Audi Sauber is going to be a thing. We know that Audi are going to partner with Sauber from 2026, but even before then, they might be a potential partner. And they've been very clear they want German drivers. Mick Schumacher possibly will be one of them. And what a pairing that would be, Vettel and Mick Schumacher, right, alongside each other with the Audi Sauber team in a couple of years' time. That'd be very interesting. I don't know if it will happen, but Hamilton says, look, you're probably going to come back, Seb. I don't expect you to be gone too long. Even Seb was joking. Seb hasn't denied it necessarily. He's not said, look, there's no way, I've had enough. He even said back in Suzuka, if someone wants to come in and offer him a seat for one race in Suzuka, he would more than happily accept it. And he said to Hamilton, right, yeah, give me a year in the Mercedes, then I'd take that, right? So I think Vettel just wants to be in a competitive car. And if he was, he'd probably still compete because he's not as old as Hamilton and might still have some time left in him. So we'll see if that comes to fruition as well. And even he mentioned Alonso. He looked at Fernando and was like, Fernando's been through that, went away for a couple of years, came back and is still at the top of his game. I'm sure Vettel sees and feels that as well, depending on what the grid looks like in the next couple of seasons. Let's talk about Perez and Monaco. We saw the other day that telemetry data that heavily implied something might not be right here. This is a thumbnail here from Mr. Yellowstener, who does the telemetry stuff, looking at the fact that, yeah, Perez going around this corner, mid-corner was max on the throttle, max on the brake, and didn't really attempt to correct counter steer the car as he went round, which is what Jolyon Palmer talked about. So definitely some suspicions raised about this. Perez has flatly denied that he crashed on purpose. He didn't really have that much motive to do so. Verstappen was behind him in P4, but the two Ferraris were already P1, P2. So it's not like he gained massively by doing this or anything. And he's denied heavily, of course. Like, what's he going to say? He's going to say he did it on purpose. The last time someone admitted to crashing on purpose, that didn't go too well. Crashgate, etc., etc. But as he says, everyone makes mistakes or general in qualifying. And he says he was on the limit from turn 1. He already, nearly lost it at turn 1. People make mistakes. I was already playing with the throttle. The rumour is wrong. Speculation from the media to keep people creating rumours, etc., etc. He's not exactly going to say that he did crash on purpose, right? And this is supposedly the reason. It may not be. There may be an additional reason, but this is supposedly the reason why Verstappen held a grudge about this, because it prevented Verstappen getting above him, you could argue, in Monaco qualifying and potentially winning that race if things had have gone differently, because Perez won the race at the end of the day after the Ferrari disaster class in the pits. But, that was supposedly the reason why Verstappen did what he did in Brazil, not letting Perez back through for the points. Now, this is what Sainz says. Very interesting, actually, without commenting on this particular incident. But if you read between the lines, he kind of does comment on this incident. He says basically there should be some penalty for doing this, either like an actual 3-place, 5-place grid penalty, your lap time gets deleted from the rest of the session, I don't know. But he reckons there should be some sort of penalty involved, as he says you should get a penalty. If not, not, we're all going to start playing around with it. And I have seen over the last few years a lot more playing around with it than what you might have even picked out in the media. Very interesting statement, saying that this has happened way more often than we even talk about. We've even seen a couple of times this season. The example that people may well remember is in Baku with Alonso, as I said the other day, accidentally forgetting to change his brake bias, going into one of the final corners, going off, shooting down the escape road, parking up, and then, oh no, Alex Albon's lap has double yellow flags, so you can't, he can't push through that section. So, that was seemingly intentional. We've seen it in the past, Rosberg at Monaco, Schumacher at Monaco, and it's happened many times. There are some notable examples, but apparently Carlos Sainz reckons this happens way more often than people even give it credit for, because if you make a mistake, you go off an escape road accidentally, and it screws up the laps of those guys behind you. Even in Brazil, right, George Russell, there were some questions there. Okay, the mistake he made into turn 4 in those conditions where it was raining, went off into the gravel, right? That was maybe understandable, went on the white line, couldn't, locked up the brakes, couldn't actually slow down the car. But then when he went onto the escape road and then spun it back into the gravel, that was interesting, right? Because that was an obvious, bad mistake, right? To accidentally spin it on the escape road and get beached in the gravel. That maybe looked a bit suspicious as well. So Science reckons that, this happens a lot more than people give it credit for. And pretty much implying that if the media is talking about the Perez thing being suspicious and potentially, deliberate, then Science is well, yeah, it happens way more than you think. Kind of implying that he reckons potentially that's what was going on here. Because he also went on to say, I'm not going to comment on the Perez crash, but I think all 20 drivers, when we analyze these kind of incidents, we know immediately whether the driver has done it on purpose or not, because we are not stupid. So, that's all he says on Perez. He's yeah, we know if they've done it or not because we're not stupid. So, I don't know, read between the lines there is what I would say. I'm not going to comment an incident of the past, but he says if there was a rule forbidding it or making sure that if you do cause a yellow or red flag, you get a penalty or you get your lap times deleted or whatever it is, then it wouldn't even go through your head as a thought to potentially do that and screw over the laps of people behind you. Perez has gone on to say, it's all good. Internally, they've had the discussions and it's all sunshine and rainbows, but yeah, we'll see if that actually happens this season or even next season as well. But in fairness, Max Verstappen will have to give something up this weekend. He's got to give up his seat in FP1 to Liam Lawson, who's going to do the kind of mandatory rookie session this weekend as well. Let's talk Ferrari. Firstly, this big drama from yesterday that apparently Charles Leclerc and Matteo Binotto are really not on speaking terms anymore. This comes since Silverstone, apparently, where they did the whole, the Binotto finger pointing thing at Leclerc. And apparently they don't, well, actually, here's the image itself. Apparently they no longer speak to each other. So, look, whether not speaking to each other is probably a figure of speech. I'm sure they have exchanged some words since then. And apparently they put this to bed at some dinner in Monaco. But clearly, not exactly resentment, but the frustration from Leclerc to Binotto and the way things have gone has obviously been mounting, and we saw it kind of boil over a fair bit in Brazil with what Leclerc was saying on the radio. So, yeah, I don't know what Ferrari's thought process is here, because, of course, the rumour has it Matteo Binotto is going to be binned off, and they're going to bring in Fred Vasseur, someone who Leclerc has a good relationship with. Seems to me they're valuing Leclerc over, Binotto, which I think is understandable, but probably that's because the relationship between the two of them has not been good since Silverstone. And obviously, look, he got screwed over heavily on the strategy side at Silverstone, as in Monaco, as elsewhere, and even not just strategy, but largely engine issues as well. They're not necessarily Binotto's faults, but it's his responsibility to deal with the issues they've had over the season, and those issues have recurred and become pretty much a systemic operations issue in terms of putting the wrong tyres on, etc., by the time even it's at the end of the season. So no surprise that Binotto's place is in jeopardy, but potentially because Leclerc is not a happy man there, and they don't want to lose Leclerc to another team. They don't want him to just go and join Mercedes when Hamilton retires, but it's not even clear where that's going to be either. So it's not like Leclerc has any better options, but they certainly don't want to lose him, especially if who knows what happens with Perez and Leclerc's really pushing for the move to Red Bull. Who knows what's going to happen over the next couple of seasons. And Carlos Sainz and even Charles Leclerc has kind of shut down these rumours, saying that, yeah, these rumours are going to happen. We're at the end of the season, so there's going to be discussions about this, and they've kind of not commented really on the Binotto leaving rumour. They're obviously not going to, but it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And this is even the kind of team photo here at the end of the season, where there are some smiles from the Ferrari crew, but they know this season is, has gone far worse than it could have done for them, given what the season started out as with that 1-2 back in Bahrain. More news then, just before the race weekend begins, on the engines. So a report comes out here from Giuliano De Chessa that apparently Ferrari is losing an estimated 0.6 of a second, I guess, per lap by turning its engine down due to reliability concerns. We've seen this pretty much since Austria, that they haven't haven't had a reliability mechanical DNF. It's obvious they turned their engine down to a certain extent, and in terms of straight line speeds, they haven't maybe been as competitive as they were before, but clearly they want to resolve this issue. Now, apparently they are losing about 25 to 30 horsepower compared to what they maximally could put out with this engine due to reliability issues. Now, 6/10 for 30 horsepower seems like an awful lot to me. Maybe around Spa, that's maybe arguable, but around most circuits, like, there's no way they were losing 6/10 a lap just on their engine around Brazil. They were only a 1/10 of a second off the Mercedes that's been much quicker for quite some time. And maybe it has cost them a bit in terms of like acceleration out of corners where they were so strong at the start of the season, but arguably that was because their car was lighter than the other car, so it looked better by consequence of that. So I don't know. Now, it seems, as I say, 6/10 has got to be an exaggeration. There's no way they're losing that much off this horsepower, and maybe that's what they lose compared to their absolute maximum. But the thing is, like, no team runs their engines at maximum because they've got to survive, right? Mercedes obviously can't do that either. Red Bull can't run their engines at absolute maximum. So maybe they lose 6/10 compared to their maximum capacity, and maybe they gain a couple of tenths a second per lap if they can sort these reliability problems out, which they can, but it doesn't mean all of a sudden they're going to be a rocket ship, I imagine. But yeah, I don't know, maybe it's just like another classic Ferrari next year is our year type shenanigans here. And just a comment yesterday, because we talked about the Mercedes power units and what they might have changed. This is some additional information here. Apparently they brought in Mexico a new turbine management software. That might be the line of code that I was talking about that has allowed for better heat dispersion. So the engine is the same, but the software that runs on the engine is different now, allowing them to disperse heat better than previously, which probably means they can run the engine at a higher power level than they have been able to previously, which might make up for that difference we saw in straight line speed in Brazil compared to Red Bull, and might maintain itself here in Abu Dhabi, where it's going to be crucial, certainly in race conditions. But yeah, that's pretty much all your updates for now, guys. It's been a hectic couple of days in the Formula 1 world, and tomorrow straight into free practice 1, and I'm sure there's going to be more talking points there. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, not far off 12,000. Really appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.